"Sir, we are going to have to ask you to leave." The words echoed through the marble lobby with enough volume for nearby guests to stop their conversations, turn their heads, and quietly decide that the man standing alone beside the front desk did not belong inside one of Chicago's most prestigious luxury hotels. Nathan Carter looked at the security manager for a brief moment, then offered the same calm smile he had worn through far more difficult days. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He simply nodded, adjusted the worn leather jacket folded over his arm, and held a small brown envelope a little closer against his chest. Sometimes dignity sounds quieter than pride, but it lasts much longer. The Sinclair Grand Hotel sparkled beneath towering crystal chandeliers that reflected warm afternoon sunlight across polished marble floors imported from Italy. Business executives checked into lavish suites while vacationing families admired enormous floral arrangements rising from elegant bronze vases. Uniformed staff moved gracefully between guests, creating the effortless luxury that had made Sinclair hotels famous across America. Nathan looked completely out of place. His blue flannel shirt had been freshly pressed, but the faded denim jeans and well-used work boots told a story of long days spent building furniture instead of attending corporate banquets. None of that embarrassed him. The only thing occupying his thoughts was the small envelope he carried so carefully. Inside rested a platinum card holder, an expensive wristwatch, and a handwritten note he had found outside the hotel entrance the previous evening after picking up his 10-year-old daughter from the public library. He had driven nearly 30 miles that morning simply to return everything personally. The young receptionist glanced nervously toward the security manager. "Sir, if these items belong to one of our guests, we can take them from here." Nathan smiled politely. "I promised my daughter I would hand them directly to the owner if possible. She said that when something valuable is lost, returning it should feel personal." Before the receptionist could answer, another hotel guest stepped forward with visible impatience. People cannot just wander into places like this expecting special treatment. Several nearby visitors quietly agreed with sympathetic looks, believing they already understood the entire situation without asking a single question. Nathan lowered his eyes for only a second before speaking with gentle respect. "I am not asking for special treatment. I only came to keep a promise." The security manager folded his hands professionally. "Sir, I appreciate your intentions, but we cannot verify your story. Please leave the property." Nathan gave one final nod. "I understand. Have a good afternoon." Without another word, he turned toward the revolving glass doors, still holding the envelope that had become unexpectedly heavy in his hands. High above the lobby, inside a private executive conference room overlooking the hotel entrance through a wall of security monitors, Victoria Sinclair paused in the middle of a meeting with senior directors. She had been reviewing expansion plans for the company's newest luxury resort when movement on one of the screens caught her attention. The image zoomed automatically toward the front lobby. Her expression changed instantly. She recognized the brown envelope before she recognized the man holding it. Only 30 minutes earlier her executive assistant had informed her that her late father's platinum cardholder and treasured watch had somehow disappeared after a charity luncheon inside the hotel. Victoria stood so abruptly that every conversation around the polished conference table stopped. "Pause the meeting," she said quietly, never taking her eyes off the monitor. Then she did something none of the executives in the room had ever witnessed. She slipped off her high heels, left them beside her chair without a second thought, and ran barefoot toward the elevator, while downstairs the quiet single father who had expected nothing in return had already begun walking away. Nathan Carter had almost reached the stone staircase leading toward the valet entrance when he heard hurried footsteps echoing behind him across the polished pavement. At first he assumed another guest was simply rushing toward a waiting car, so he continued walking without turning around. Then a woman's voice called out, clear enough to rise above the afternoon traffic. "Please wait." Nathan stopped and slowly looked over his shoulder. Victoria Sinclair stood several yards away, slightly out of breath, her cream business suit moving gently in the autumn breeze while her bare feet rested against the cool stone walkway. Hotel employees, chauffeurs, and arriving guests stared in complete disbelief. The chief executive officer of Sinclair Hotels had crossed the entire lobby without shoes, not to greet a celebrity or an important investor, but to catch a quiet man who had already accepted being turned away with grace. Nathan looked briefly at the shoes still missing from her feet before speaking with genuine concern. "The pavement is cold." Victoria smiled softly despite her hurried breathing. "So is realizing someone was treated unfairly in my hotel." For a moment neither of them spoke. The sounds of expensive cars arriving beneath the grand entrance faded into the background while dozens of curious eyes remained fixed on the unexpected scene unfolding outside one of Chicago's finest hotels. Victoria took another step closer and looked at the brown envelope still resting safely in Nathan's hands. "My assistant told me my father's cardholder and watch disappeared after today's luncheon." Nathan nodded and carefully extended the envelope toward her. "My daughter found them near the front sidewalk last night after we left the library. She thought whoever lost them might be worried." Victoria accepted the envelope with both hands instead of one. When she slowly opened it, everything remained exactly as it had been reported missing, including a neatly folded handwritten note. She unfolded the paper and immediately recognized the careful handwriting. It belonged to a 10-year-old child. It read, "We hope these belong to someone who misses them. My dad says the fastest way to make the world better is to return what is not ours. Have a wonderful day." Victoria read the note twice before quietly closing the envelope again. She looked back at Nathan, and for the first time since inheriting her family's company, she found herself unable to think of the proper executive response. "Your daughter wrote this?" Nathan smiled with unmistakable pride. "She insisted on adding the note. She thought it might help whoever lost those things feel a little less anxious." Victoria lowered her eyes for a brief moment, remembering that the watch had belonged to her late father and had become one of the few possessions she still carried to every important event. She looked up again with gratitude shining across her face. "Thank you is not enough." Nathan gently shook his head. "You do not owe me anything. I only kept a promise." Behind them the security manager hurried outside, his expression shifting from professional confidence to visible regret as he finally understood what had truly happened. Several employees quietly exchanged embarrassed glances while nearby guests who had witnessed the misunderstanding lowered their eyes. Nathan noticed their discomfort before anyone else did. Instead of allowing the silence to become heavier, he offered the security manager a warm smile. "You were only doing your job." The man opened his mouth to apologize, but the words seemed difficult to find. Victoria looked from Nathan to her employees, then back again. In that quiet moment she understood that true character was revealed long before recognition arrived. She had spent years building five-star hotels filled with beautiful rooms, but standing before her was a man whose simple honesty carried more value than anything money could decorate. Victoria stood quietly for several seconds, still holding the brown envelope against her heart as though it contained far more than a cardholder and a watch. Around her, hotel employees slowly returned to their responsibilities, yet the atmosphere had changed. Conversations became softer. Smiles grew more thoughtful. It was as though everyone present had witnessed a lesson no training manual could ever teach. Nathan glanced toward the parking lot where his aging pickup truck waited beneath a row of maple trees. "I should get going," he said gently. "My daughter finishes school in less than an hour." Victoria looked almost surprised that he intended to leave so quickly. "Would you at least allow me to thank both of you properly?" Nathan smiled with quiet kindness. "You already have." She shook her head. "No. I have accepted your honesty. I have not yet honored it." Nathan hesitated for a moment before answering. "If you really want to thank someone, thank my daughter. She is the one who reminded me that returning something valuable should never be rushed." Victoria's expression softened even more. "What is her name?" "Emma." The simple answer seemed to linger in the cool afternoon air. "She is 10 years old," Nathan continued. "She believes every person deserves one good surprise each day. Yesterday she decided yours should be finding something you thought was gone forever." Victoria laughed quietly, though her eyes carried unmistakable emotion. She sounds remarkable. Nathan shrugged with the familiar humility that seemed woven into every word he spoke. She keeps teaching me how to become a better father. Before either of them noticed, the hotel valet carefully approached carrying Victoria's high heels in both hands. She thanked him warmly before slipping them back on, but her attention never fully left the quiet man standing before her. "Would you join me for coffee before you leave?" she asked. Nathan looked briefly toward the dashboard clock visible through his truck windshield. "I would like to, but Emma and I always stop for hot chocolate on Fridays after school. We have not missed one in almost 4 years." Victoria smiled. "That sounds like an important appointment." "It is." She nodded with genuine understanding. "Then I will not keep you." Nathan extended his hand politely. "Take care of yourself, Miss Sinclair." She accepted the handshake, immediately noticing the roughness of his hands, shaped by years of woodworking rather than board meetings. There was strength there, but also patience. The kind earned through countless ordinary days lived with purpose. As Nathan climbed into his pickup truck and slowly drove away from the hotel, Victoria remained standing beneath the grand entrance far longer than necessary. She watched until the truck disappeared beyond the busy intersection before quietly returning inside. Later that evening, after finishing the meeting she had postponed, Victoria entered her private office overlooking downtown Chicago. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass while silence filled the spacious room. She unfolded Emma's handwritten note once more and placed it beside a framed photograph of her late father. For the first time in years, the expensive office no longer felt impressive. It felt empty. Meanwhile, nearly 30 miles away in a quiet neighborhood, Nathan pulled into the driveway of a small white house with blue shutters. Before he could even switch off the engine, the front door opened and Emma ran onto the porch carrying her backpack with a bright smile that made the long day disappear from his face. "Did you find the owner?" she asked eagerly. Nathan smiled as he stepped out of the truck. "We did." Emma grinned. "Was she happy?" Nathan looked toward the golden sunset stretching across the neighborhood before answering with quiet certainty. "I think she found something today that she did not even realize she had been missing." The following Tuesday morning, Victoria canceled 2 meetings that had been scheduled for months, leaving her senior executives exchanging puzzled glances as she climbed into a simple black sedan without the usual corporate convoy following behind. She carried only a small notebook, a travel mug of coffee, and the folded note Emma had written, now tucked safely inside the notebook like a quiet reminder that some of life's greatest lessons arrived in ordinary handwriting. The navigation system guided her away from downtown Chicago toward a peaceful neighborhood where tree-lined streets replaced glass towers and familiar faces greeted one another from front porches. She finally stopped outside Carter Woodworks, a modest workshop with freshly painted white trim, neatly stacked lumber, and flower boxes beneath the windows that someone had obviously cared for with love rather than money. A wooden sign above the entrance simply read, "Built to last." Victoria stepped inside, where the comforting scent of cedar and freshly sanded oak filled the warm afternoon air. Sunlight streamed through wide workshop windows, illuminating rows of handcrafted tables, bookshelves, rocking chairs, and children's furniture that looked less like products and more like family heirlooms waiting for new homes. Nathan stood near a large workbench carefully repairing the leg of an old rocking chair while an elderly woman watched with grateful eyes. "There you go," he said with his familiar gentle smile as he handed the chair back to her. "It should outlast both of us now." The woman laughed warmly. "You always say that." Nathan shrugged. "Because good things deserve another chance." She reached into her purse, but Nathan politely raised his hand. "This one is on the house." "Nathan, you cannot keep doing free repairs." "Maybe not forever," he replied with a smile, "but today I still can." The woman thanked him before leaving, passing Victoria with a cheerful greeting. "You are lucky if you came to see him," she said softly. "There are not many men left who care more about people than profit." Victoria watched quietly until the front door closed before speaking. "I believe I am starting to understand that." Nathan looked up from the workbench and smiled with pleasant surprise. "Miss Sinclair." Please, she answered gently. Call me Victoria. He nodded. Only if you call me Nathan. They shared an easy smile that felt unexpectedly natural. Victoria slowly walked around the workshop, running her fingertips lightly across the smooth surface of a handcrafted dining table. You built all of these? Nathan nodded. Mostly during evenings after Emma finishes her homework. Victoria looked at the craftsmanship with genuine admiration. Every joint fit perfectly. Every finish reflected patience rather than speed. You could charge much more for this quality. Nathan smiled without looking up from the chair he was polishing. Maybe. But then some families who need these pieces would never be able to afford them. Before Victoria could answer, the workshop door opened again. Emma skipped inside carrying a backpack almost as large as herself. Dad, my teacher loved the birdhouse we made. She suddenly noticed Victoria and stopped with wide eyes before smiling brightly. You are the lady from the hotel. Victoria laughed softly. I was hoping you would remember me. Emma walked over without hesitation. Did your father like getting his watch back? Victoria paused for a moment before answering honestly. I think he would have been very proud of the two people who returned it. Emma beamed with quiet happiness, then slipped her small hand into her father's. Watching them together beneath the warm afternoon sunlight, surrounded by handcrafted furniture built with care instead of haste, Victoria quietly realized that she had entered a place where success was measured differently, not by the size of a building or the balance of an account, but by the number of lives gently made better before the day was done. By the end of the week, the story that had quietly unfolded outside the Sinclair Grand Hotel was no longer a private misunderstanding. A guest who had witnessed the encounter uploaded a short video showing the moment Victoria hurried barefoot across the hotel entrance to stop the man who had been asked to leave. The recording spread quickly across social media, but unlike most viral moments, people were not interested in embarrassment. They wanted to know why the chief executive officer of one of America's most respected luxury hotel companies had run after an ordinary single father. Television commentators praised her humility while newspapers highlighted the honesty of the man who had returned priceless belongings without asking for recognition. Yet inside the executive boardroom of Sinclair Hotels, the mood was far less hopeful. Several board members gathered around the long walnut conference table with expressions shaped more by concern than compassion. One director adjusted his glasses before speaking carefully. Victoria, public sympathy is temporary. We should avoid discussing this any further before it becomes a larger issue for the brand. Another executive nodded. A formal apology might suggest legal responsibility where none exists. Victoria listened quietly until every opinion had been shared. She folded her hands together and looked around the room with calm determination. The larger issue is not that an honest man was asked to leave one of our hotels. The larger issue is that every employee believed appearances before character. The room became noticeably quieter. If we teach our people to value image above integrity, she continued gently, then eventually our guests will notice the difference. No one answered immediately. The silence that followed carried far more weight than another argument ever could. Meanwhile, several miles away, Nathan spent the afternoon helping Emma prepare small wooden bird feeders for a weekend neighborhood fundraiser benefiting the local elementary school library. Sawdust drifted gently through the workshop as father and daughter worked side by side beneath warm afternoon sunlight. Dad, Emma asked while carefully painting tiny flowers along one roof, are you famous now? Nathan laughed softly. I certainly hope not. Emma tilted her head. My teacher said she saw you on television. Nathan smiled as he continued sanding a wooden edge until it felt perfectly smooth. Sometimes people pay attention for a few days. What matters is whether we still do the right thing after everyone stops watching. Emma thought quietly before nodding. That sounds harder. It usually is. At that moment, a black sedan stopped outside the workshop once again. Victoria stepped out carrying a large portfolio case instead of her usual business briefcase. Nathan welcomed her with the same easy smile he offered everyone. Good afternoon, Victoria. She returned the smile before carefully opening the portfolio. Inside were architectural drawings for a new community reading center the Sinclair Foundation hoped to build in an underserved neighborhood. "I have interviewed famous designers all week," she admitted. Every proposal looked expensive. None of them felt personal. She looked directly at Nathan. "Would you consider helping us build something children will remember for the rest of their lives?" Nathan studied the drawings without speaking for several moments. Emma quietly looked over his shoulder with growing excitement. Finally Nathan raised his eyes. "If the building is meant to help children discover hope, then it deserves more than beautiful architecture. It deserves to feel like home." Victoria smiled, realizing she had not come searching for a designer. She had come searching for the one person who understood that the strongest foundations were never poured in concrete alone, but were first built inside the human heart. The following Monday morning, Nathan arrived at Sinclair Foundation headquarters carrying nothing more than a leather portfolio filled with carefully sketched ideas, a tape measure tucked into his jacket pocket, and the quiet confidence that came from years of building things meant to last. The glass doors opened automatically as he stepped inside, but unlike his first visit to one of the Sinclair properties, every employee who recognized him greeted him with warm smiles and genuine respect. The security manager from the hotel lobby had even requested permission to be there that morning. As Nathan entered the reception area, the man walked forward with visible humility. "Mr. Carter," he said softly, "I have wanted to apologize properly ever since that day." Nathan offered his familiar gentle smile before extending his hand. "You already have." The security manager looked surprised. "How?" "By learning from it." The man lowered his eyes for a brief moment before shaking Nathan's hand with quiet gratitude. Victoria had been watching the exchange from the mezzanine above. She smiled to herself, realizing once again that forgiveness often accomplished what embarrassment never could. A few minutes later they gathered inside a bright conference room overlooking the Chicago skyline. Large sheets of architectural paper covered the table while community leaders, teachers, librarians, and foundation volunteers discussed what children truly needed instead of what looked impressive in fundraising brochures. Nathan listened far more than he spoke. He carefully wrote notes each time a teacher described students searching for quiet places to read or when a librarian explained how many children simply wanted a comfortable chair where someone believed they belonged. Finally Victoria looked toward him. "What do you think?" Nathan slowly unrolled one of his sketches. Instead of a grand modern building filled with expensive finishes, the drawing showed warm wooden reading corners, large windows welcoming natural sunlight, handcrafted bookshelves built at a child's height, rocking chairs where grandparents could read stories, and a welcoming front porch instead of intimidating front steps. "Children remember how a place makes them feel," Nathan said quietly. "If a building feels like home, they will come back long after they forget who designed it." The room fell silent as everyone studied the drawing. One elderly school principal gently wiped away a tear. "That," she whispered, "is exactly what our neighborhood has been missing." Victoria looked across the table with admiration that had nothing to do with architecture. She had hired consultants who spoke about efficiency, prestige, and branding. Nathan had spoken about children. Later that afternoon, after the meeting ended, Victoria walked beside Nathan through a small city park glowing beneath early autumn sunshine. Families pushed strollers along winding paths while children laughed near a fountain surrounded by colorful flowers. Neither of them seemed in a hurry to reach their cars. "There is something I have been wondering," Victoria said gently. Nathan smiled. "You ask thoughtful questions. Go ahead." She looked toward the trees before speaking. "The foundation researched your background while preparing today's meeting." Nathan nodded without surprise. "I assumed you would." She looked back at him. "You studied architecture at one of the best universities in the country. You won national design awards before you turned 30. Several firms offered you extraordinary careers. Then, everything simply stopped." Nathan remained quiet for a few moments as a gentle breeze carried golden leaves across the walking path. Finally he answered with the same calm honesty that had first caught her attention. After my wife passed away, Emma needed a father more than the world needed another architect. Victoria felt her heart grow still. There was no bitterness in his voice. No regret. Only peace earned through sacrifice. In that quiet moment she understood that the greatest masterpiece Nathan Carter had ever built was not made of wood or stone. It was the remarkable little girl waiting every afternoon for her father to come home. 3 weeks later, the grand ballroom of the Sinclair Grand Hotel looked remarkably different from the day Nathan had quietly walked through its doors carrying a simple brown envelope. The crystal chandeliers still shimmered above polished marble floors, elegant flower arrangements still welcomed distinguished guests, and the same piano filled the room with gentle melodies, yet the atmosphere carried something far more meaningful than luxury. This evening, the hotel had invited teachers, volunteers, employees, community leaders, and families to celebrate the launch of the new neighborhood reading center. Victoria had insisted that the event begin not with a business announcement, but with gratitude. As guests settled into their seats, reporters quietly prepared their cameras, curious about why the chief executive officer had personally requested such broad media coverage for what appeared to be a modest community project. Victoria stepped onto the stage wearing a simple navy evening dress instead of the glamorous designer gowns often featured in magazines. She paused for a moment, looking across the familiar ballroom before speaking with calm sincerity. Several weeks ago, someone entered this hotel carrying honesty in his hands. We almost failed to recognize it because we judged appearance before character. The room became completely still. Victoria looked toward Nathan, who sat beside Emma near the front of the audience, looking as humble as he had on the very first day. Today, she continued, I would like to correct that mistake publicly. She invited Nathan and Emma to join her on stage. Neither of them expected the request, but after exchanging a quiet smile, they slowly walked forward together. Emma held her father's hand while Nathan greeted every employee he passed with the same warm respect he had always shown. When they reached the stage, Victoria turned toward the audience rather than toward the cameras. Luxury should never begin with beautiful buildings. It should begin with how people are treated when they walk through the front door. Several employees quietly lowered their eyes, remembering the afternoon that had changed everything. Victoria continued with gentle honesty. Mr. Nathan Carter, on behalf of Sinclair Hotels, I sincerely apologize for the way you were treated inside this building. You deserved kindness before questions. You deserved respect before assumptions. We failed to give you either. The ballroom remained silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning above. Nathan looked at Victoria for a long moment before answering. Thank you. She seemed almost surprised by the simplicity of his response. That is all? Nathan smiled gently. An apology is a gift. It should be accepted with gratitude, not made heavier with resentment. Several people quietly wiped tears from their eyes. The security manager who had once asked Nathan to leave stood near the back of the ballroom, his expression filled with humility. Nathan looked toward him and gave a small reassuring nod that seemed to lift an invisible burden from the man's shoulders. Victoria then revealed a new initiative that would become part of every Sinclair property across the country. Every employee, from executives to front desk staff, would complete a new hospitality program built around one simple principle: every guest deserves dignity before judgment. The audience rose to its feet in heartfelt applause, not because a company had announced another policy, but because they had witnessed genuine accountability. As the applause slowly faded, Emma quietly tugged on Victoria's sleeve. Can I tell everyone one thing? Victoria smiled warmly and handed her the microphone. Emma looked across the ballroom with innocent confidence. My dad says people remember how you make them feel long after they forget what you say. A gentle silence settled over the room once again. It was the kind of silence that only truth could create, and in that quiet moment every person present understood that the most valuable lesson shared inside the Sinclair Grand Hotel had never appeared on a balance sheet, but had quietly walked through the front door carrying a simple brown envelope. 1 year later, the neighborhood reading center opened beneath a clear spring sky filled with bright sunshine, blooming flowers, and the joyful laughter of children racing across the front lawn with library cards proudly held in their hands. The building looked exactly as Nathan had imagined during those first quiet sketches spread across the conference table. Warm cedar beams welcomed every visitor. Large windows filled every room with natural light. Handcrafted bookshelves stood low enough for even the smallest readers to reach their favorite stories without asking for help. Rocking chairs rested beside fireplaces where grandparents already gathered with children eager to hear another chapter before heading home. Above the entrance, carved into a simple wooden sign by Nathan's own hands, were the words, "Every child deserves to feel at home." Hundreds of guests arrived throughout the morning. Teachers, librarians, construction workers, volunteers, hotel employees, neighborhood families, and community leaders filled the courtyard, yet the celebration never felt extravagant. It felt personal. Victoria stood beside Nathan near the entrance, wearing a simple light blue dress instead of the formal business attire that had once defined every public appearance. She watched children run through the front doors with excitement that no luxury hotel grand opening had ever inspired. "This is the most beautiful project our foundation has ever completed," she whispered. Nathan smiled gently. "Because it belongs to the children now." Nearby, Emma carefully guided younger students toward the reading corner she had helped decorate with colorful artwork and handwritten welcome notes. Every child who entered received the same greeting. "We are really glad you are here." Victoria quietly noticed that several nervous children immediately relaxed after hearing those simple words. She leaned closer to Nathan and smiled. "She is still teaching all of us." Nathan laughed softly. "She always will." During the dedication ceremony, Victoria stepped to the podium and looked across the crowd before speaking. "People often ask me what changed the direction of our company over the past year." She paused briefly, her eyes finding Nathan and Emma standing together beneath the wooden sign. The answer was never a business strategy. It was a quiet father who chose dignity instead of anger, and a little girl who believed returning something valuable should always feel personal. The audience answered with warm applause, but Nathan simply lowered his eyes with humble gratitude. When the ceremony ended, families explored every room while children filled the shelves with borrowed books and hopeful conversations. Emma quietly walked over to Victoria carrying a folded piece of paper. "I made something for you," she said with a bright smile. Victoria unfolded it carefully. It was another drawing. This one showed 3 people sitting together on the reading center porch while dozens of children laughed nearby. Above them Emma had written, "The best homes welcome everyone." Victoria felt tears gently gather in her eyes as she looked toward Nathan. Without speaking, he reached for her hand, and she gladly held his. No promises needed to be announced. No grand speeches remained to be made. The quiet certainty shared between them spoke more clearly than words ever could. As the afternoon sunlight settled across the wooden porch and children's laughter drifted through the open windows, Nathan looked at the life surrounding him and realized that the greatest gift had never been finding a lost watch or receiving a public apology. It had been discovering that kindness, once given freely, always finds its way home. And sometimes the greatest luxury in the world is not found inside a magnificent hotel, but in the peaceful moment when a wounded heart finally discovers the family it has been searching for all along.